Hello, dear listener. Welcome to a quiet corner of time, where stories drift like leaves on the wind, and every tale brings you closer to rest. Tonight, you'll hear three gentle journeys, woven with memory, connection, and the warmth of human spirit. A healer, a weaver, a father and son, each carrying love through silence, through wilderness, through thread and firelight. Let your breath slow. Let your mind soften. And let these stories guide you gently towards sleep. Now, we begin. The Quiet Fire, a healer of Elder Glen. In a small village tucked between thick woods and crooked hills, there lived a man named Elias Thorn. He was not wealthy, nor was he noble by birth. But to the people of Elder Glen, he was a lifeline. Elias was the village doctor, and in the year of 1623, that meant more than tending to coughs or fevers. He travelled by foot, through forests and muddy paths, sometimes in the dead of night, sometimes in storms that bent trees like twigs. There were no hospitals,
no pharmacies.
Every remedy was crafted by hand: boiled roots, crushed bark, dried flowers. To find his medicine, Elias would barter with passing merchants, trade salted meat for a pinch of opium, or a woolen cloak for a sack of cloves. When trade failed him, he would go into the wild, basket in hand, collecting foxglove, feverfew, and angelica. He learned to read the land, to know which flowers opened their heads to the east, and which roots burrowed deepest in clay. His tiny cottage near the edge of the woods smelled of smoke, vinegar, and crushed herbs. Villagers would knock on his door at all hours, and Elias never turned them away. A mother weeping for her fevered child, a farmer with a festering wound, a midwife struggling with a birth gone wrong. Elias was there, hands steady, eyes kind, mind sharp as any blade. Yet, he was not free of hardship. There were those who feared him, men who whispered he dealt in dark things, that he spoke to spirits when the moon was high. His books, bound in leather and filled with strange symbols, sparked rumors of witchcraft. But Elias paid them no mind. He knew the truth. He had studied under an old apothecary, a woman named Breda, who lived beyond the fen. Breda had taught him everything: to grind powders fine as dust, to bleed a man gently, to listen to what the body did not say aloud. He remembered her words even now: a healer must never turn away from suffering, even if the world turns away from him. And so he stayed, year after year, through famine, through plague, through winters so bitter they cracked the stones. He buried more patients than he saved. But still he tried. Still he learned. Still he hoped. In time, children grew and had children of their own. And all of them knew Elias. They left wildflowers at his doorstep, and lanterns during the long nights. The priest once called him a godless man. But when his own lungs filled with blackness, he sent for Elias. And Elias came, with a satchel of bitter teas, and hands that did not shake. He sat at the man's bedside for 3 days, whispered old prayers he did not believe, just to ease the priest's passing. He wept, not because he had lost a patient, but because he knew he had never been fully seen. But it was enough to serve, to heal, to endure. Elias Thorn died in his sleep, at the age of 74. The entire village came to his funeral. Old women held each other and wept. Children left herbs on his grave. And the bell tolled 13 times. They say the forest bloomed early that year, as if the earth itself had mourned his passing. And though his cottage crumbled in time, the villagers remembered. Stories passed from tongue to tongue, of the doctor who never said no, who gave all he had to those who had nothing. Elias Thorne, healer, herbalist, friend, and in the hearts of Elderglen's people, always, doctor. But that was not the end. For long after his death, strange things were whispered in Elderglen. The sick claimed they dreamed of Elias, saw his face by candlelight, felt his hand on theirs in moments of pain. No one spoke these things aloud, but they left offerings at his grave still, not just herbs, but notes, names, pleas for healing. And the forest around his old cottage never overgrew it. Not fully. As though something, or someone, kept the path clear. One day, many years later, a young girl named Marin found her way to that same cottage. She had dreams too, of a man with kind eyes and steady hands. She found Breeder's old texts, Elias's notes, jars still sealed, roots still potent. And slowly, carefully, she began to learn. Elderglen had a healer once more. Not in the same way. Not yet. But in time. And when people came to her, frightened, in pain, she greeted them the way Elias once had. With open doors, and steady hands, and a heart full of quiet fire. The Weaver's Tapestry. In the quiet mountain town of Era's Hollow, the snow arrived early and stayed late. Winters were long, winds cold enough to whisper secrets through the pines. And yet something about the place felt warm, as if time slowed for tea and memory. On the northern edge of the town, nestled near a winding cliff road, lived a woman named Liz Anwen. She was a weaver, and though she had been blind since birth, her fingers saw what her eyes could not. In her cottage, draped in dried lavender and scented with warm cedarwood, Liz wove tapestries unlike any others in the valley. Her creations, deep threads of burgundy, gold, twilight blue, carried scenes that stirred something in the soul. A boy fishing by a river his grandmother once described. A woman's dream of dancing under starlight with a long-lost lover. A soldier's forgotten childhood orchard. These were not imagined pictures. They were real memories. But not hers. Liz had never met the people whose lives she wove into her art. And yet, the images came. Every time she touched thread to loom, stories bled through. Word of her work traveled beyond the mountains. Pilgrims came with curiosity, left with wonder. Many wept, clutching a woven memory they thought had been lost. She asked no payment, only that they sit with her, sip tea, and speak honestly. She said the loom listened better when hearts were open. And they always were. But Liz held a secret. A thread she dared not pull. For in her own memory, there was a door. And behind it, silence. She remembered nothing of her early childhood. Not her mother's face. Not the sound of home. Not how she had come to be in Era's Hollow. Only that one winter, she was found at the edge of the woods, her eyes clouded, her fingers blooded from clutching thorns. The town healer took her in, raised her like kin, and taught her to feel the world through touch. But the rest, gone, like a dream upon waking. The loom became her voice. her way of anchoring herself to the world. When loneliness crept into her bones, she wove. When storms howled and branches clawed the shutters, she wove. Her fingers danced. Her soul poured itself into patterns of thread. And each tapestry told a tale she didn't know she carried. One October morning, as gold leaves danced down the hillside, a visitor came to her cottage. His name was Oren, a cartographer from the lowlands. Tall, soft-spoken, with laughter tucked behind his voice like a folded map. He brought no story for her, only a question. Why do your tapestries show places I've never been, but feel like home? Lies didn't know. She only smiled, motioned for him to sit. Over tea brewed with cardamom and pine tips, they spoke of lands and lines. How memory bends like rivers on parchment. And Oren stayed longer than he planned. One day became 2. 2 became 10. He helped chop firewood, repaired a squeaky shutter, and listened as Lies hummed songs she didn't know she remembered. The town noticed. Children whispered about the blind weaver's guest. Elders smiled knowingly. There was a gentleness to Oren that settled into the cottage like a familiar song. He brought maps, stories, laughter, and with each passing day, Lies found herself leaning in, toward his voice, his warmth, his quiet understanding. One night, during the first heavy snow, she touched a thread of green and gold. Her fingers paused. She saw a boy in a wheat field, a girl watching him from a hayloft. They laughed. She knew that laugh. "This is yours," she whispered to Oren. He froze. "But I've never—" "No," she interrupted gently. "You forgot." The tapestry showed them as children. A promise made beneath a solstice moon. Her hands trembling, Lies reached for another thread. Silver and soft. She saw herself. A child in a blue dress, hiding behind a barn door. A voice calling her name. "Lies, come see the stars." It was Oren's voice. From long ago. A friend once lost. A memory buried. Tears fell freely. He held her hands. She clutched his palms like they were anchors in deep tide. That night, under a sky dusted with frost, they sat by the fire, speaking not with words, but with silence. They remembered together. The orchard. The windmill. The moment the world turned upside down. Their families had fled a war, lost each other in the chaos. Lies had wandered, blinded by smoke, saved by strangers. Oren had been told she died. For years, he searched, mapped every ridge, every village, until he saw a tapestry in a market stall. A girl beneath a solstice moon, waiting, hoping. He followed it here, and found her. Not just the weaver, but the thread he'd been missing. Seasons passed. Oren never left. Together, they wove. Not only cloth, but a life. People still came to Era's Hollow, drawn by stories, by dreams stitched in silk. But now, Lies had someone beside her, a voice that laughed, a hand that warmed hers in winter. She still wove others' memories, but now and then, she wove her own. A child's laughter, a reunion in snowfall, a map drawn not on paper, but on hearts. And through it all, the loom whispered, not of loneliness, but of love, and how every thread, even lost ones, could find their way home. Stars above the hunt. In the summer of 1607, in the northern wilds of England, the trees whispered with the hush of wind through birch leaves, and the moss was thick beneath booted feet. In a small timber-framed cottage nestled at the edge of Thornmere forest, a father named Alric and his 13-year-old son, Ewan, prepared for a journey into the wilderness, a camping trip unlike any they had taken before. Alric was a hunter by trade and a father by heart. His wife, Ewan's mother, had passed 3 winters prior, and in her absence, the bond between father and son had grown stronger, stitched together by shared silences and mutual respect. They had camped before, short hunts near the river, nights in the lean-to behind the cottage, but never a true expedition. This time, they would be gone for 6 days. Preparation began days in advance. Alric taught Ewan how to flint his knife properly, how to seal dried meat in wax cloth, how to pack a satchel with thought and care. They stitched new soles into their leather boots and melted beeswax into the seams to keep the water out. Ewan, ever curious, asked about every plant Alric picked for their poultice bundle, every herb tucked into their stores. Rosemary, sage, yarrow. Things that healed. Things that nourished. Their weapons were simple but dependable. Alric carried his longbow, oak-limbed and strung with braided flax. Ewan had a smaller bow of ashwood, made for his height, and a short hunting knife gifted to him on his 12th birthday. They packed fishing line and bone hooks, a flint and steel, and a small pouch of salt. Ewan also snuck in his mother's pendant, an acorn carved from amber, worn now around his neck as a quiet talisman. Before dawn broke, they set off. Their boots pressed deep into the morning dew, their shadows stretched long behind them. Thornmere forest loomed ahead, vast and ancient. The trees here grew dense and tall, canopies meshed like the ribs of a vaulted cathedral. The light filtered green and gold. Ewan's breath caught in his throat at the sheer majesty of it, though he'd grown up beneath its edge. They hiked in silence for hours, speaking only when necessary. Alric taught through gesture and quiet demonstration. He would stop and point to a bent blade of grass, to claw marks on bark, to a pile of fresh droppings, all signs of game. Ewan mirrored his father's movements, learning to step lightly, to read the signs of the forest. By midday, they reached a wide glade beside a cold stream. The place was flat and rich with dry wood. A perfect campsite. They unpacked their things and set about their duties. Alric built the fire ring, while Ewan laid evergreen branches for their bedding. They worked in harmony, each knowing what needed doing without much being said. Lunch was simple: dried venison, flatbread, and river water cold enough to sting the teeth. Then came the hunt. Alric led Ewan deep into the forest, tracking a small herd of red deer. They moved slow, crouching low behind bramble and stone. Alric notched his bow, released, and struck true. Ewan watched in awe, then helped clean and dress the deer with practiced care. By evening, they roasted strips of meat over the fire. The scent filled the glade, rich and earthy. They sat side by side, the flames casting long flickers across their faces. For the first time all day, Alric spoke at length. "When I was your age," he began, "your grandfather took me out like this. We camped further west, near the shadow of Wolf's Head Hill. He taught me to track by the sound of breaking twigs, to judge wind by watching crows fly." Ewan listened intently, eyes wide with reverence. "Did you ever get scared?" Alric chuckled softly. "Every time. But I learned to befriend that fear. It sharpens you. Makes your senses wake." The stars began to appear, one by one, then in clusters. Ewan lay back on the pine bough bedding and looked up. There were no lanterns to drown the sky, no walls to block the view. Just a vast sea of stars, infinite and quiet. "That one's the hunter," Alric pointed upward, naming the constellations as his father once had. "And that, the bear. The stars tell stories, Ewan. Old ones. The same ones we tell by the fire." They shared more stories as the night grew deeper. Ewan told tales he'd heard in the village, of wandering spirits, of the horned man who guarded the forest's heart. Alric countered with memories, of winters past, of the day Ewan was born, of the first time he held him and whispered, "You'll be my greatest lesson." Later, when the fire had burned to embers, they curled beneath firs and shared silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but of deep connection. The forest rustled gently around them, the stream whispered on, and the stars kept vigil. The next morning, heavy clouds crept over the hills. By midday, the sky cracked with thunder, and a summer storm swept down through the trees. Alric and Ewan scrambled to reinforce their shelter. Rain hammered the forest, and wind screamed through the trunks. A branch snapped overhead. Alric yanked Ewan aside just before it crashed to the ground. They sat back under the lean-to, soaked and breathing hard. The storm was loud, but inside the boy's heart, a deeper worry brewed. When the storm eased, they sat by a small fire Alric managed to coax from the damp wood. Ewan stared into the flickering light. "Do you think she'd be proud of us?" he asked quietly. Alric looked up, eyes tired but warm. "Every day, lad. She's in every step we take. In every lesson I pass on. You carry her fire. And so do I." The boy's lip trembled, but he nodded. In that moment, the woods felt smaller, the world more intimate. He leaned into his father's shoulder. They said nothing else for hours. The next day, the forest revealed new wonders. Deer tracks led them to a hidden grove where bluebells bloomed like stars against the moss. At its center stood a massive yew tree, gnarled and ancient. Alric knelt beside it. "Your grandfather brought me here," he whispered. "He called it the Heartwood. Said the forest listens here more than anywhere else." Ewan reached out and touched the bark. It was warm, humming with a life older than memory. "I'll remember this," he said. "Even when I'm old." They camped there one more night, in the grove. And when they left the next morning, it was with slower steps and fuller hearts. The forest behind them seemed to whisper blessings in every gust of wind. They returned to the cottage not just as father and son, but as companions in something ancient, sacred. And every summer thereafter, no matter the year, they made the journey again. Not to chase deer or test their skills, but to find each other once more in the quiet green of Thornmere's heart. You've walked the forest paths, watched stars bloom above old trees, and heard the quiet voices of the past speak through dreams and memories. If your eyes are still open, may peace find you soon. If you're already asleep, may your dreams carry you gently forward. Thank you for listening. And until next time, stay safe, stay soft, and sleep well.